Hey, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I'm here to talk about the new Wu-Tang movie that's out. Wu-Tang American Saga, about the life of and the life and the formation of the Wu-Tang Clan, uh, the rap group from the '90s. Possibly, I say, the best rap group of the whole '90s. As far as a group, the best rap group that ever came out of the East Coast. What NWA was to uh hey Lisa, what's going on? What NWA was to the West Coast, Wu Tang was to the East Coast. So this is kind of like a version of Straight Outta Compton, but for East Coast heads, people from the East Coast. And the movie starts off, of course, in Staten Island, the Shaolin, the borough that the Wu is from. Season one starts off in the Shaolin with Ashton Saunders plays the part of RZA, Bobby Driggs, aka um, RZA, making music. Now, originally, of course, um, RZA and his brother Divine is in the drug game, and they make that transition from the drug game to the music game, and that's what this kind of shows. And it also kind of shows something. It sheds light on something I didn't really know. Not being from Staten Island, I never knew that Staten Island had beef with different sections of Staten Island. You had the Park Hill section where Method Man and uh, Raekwon was from, and then you had the section of Staten Island where the RZA and Ghostface Killer was from Stapleton. Two different projects is beefing, so it was kind of a beef at first. And RZA was kind of caught in the middle because he had grown up with Raekwon as a childhood friend, and they rapped together. And he also was a childhood friend and a rap partner with Ghostface Killer, who was called D Love at the time. So even though there was this beef, RZA kind of served as a mediator to bring both factions of Staten Island together, because their whole thing at first, their whole thing was, um, we yeah. Lisa says Staten Island's like any other borough in the sense we're having beef within the projects. Yeah, two different projects is Lisa beefing with each other, Stapleton and Park Hill. Um, each side had their own, making their own money as far as in the selling crack. You know what I mean? Because it was the 1980s and crack was rampant all over all over the world. So in the beginning, Raekwon's faction, Park Hill, has does a drive-by shooting on Ghostface Killer's house, and Ghostface Killer has brothers, two disabled brothers with muscular dystrophy, and Ghostface Killer has to duck down and protect his two brothers when Raekwon does this shooting. And after Raekwon does the shooting, he goes to RZA's house and he hides the gun in RZA's music crates. So not only is it a beef over crack, in actuality, Ghostface Killer and Raekwon actually, especially Raekwon, shot at Ghostface Killer's home. Like he actually shot his house up with his disabled brothers and his mom's in the crib there. You know what I mean? So when they when they did the verses together, I'm like, oh shit. Now that I'm watching this, it makes sense why they would do the verses together. I'm like, when they did the verses together, I'm like, why does this? Before I saw the movie, I'm like, no, they didn't, Lisa. They remained alive, but thank God. Before I saw the movie, I'm like, what sense do it make for Raekwon and Ghostface Killer to do a verses together when they were in the same group? They're both Wu-Tang. But knowing this, knowing, seeing this now that they had this real beef with each other, being both from different neighborhoods and actually shooting at each other, I'm like, yeah, it makes it makes sense. At one point, there was actually real rivals. I knew about Ghostface Killer's brothers because remember that song back in the day, all that I got is you from that Michael Jackson sample when he was like, two brothers with muscular dystrophy killed me. You know what I mean? So I knew about the brothers, but I didn't know about Raekwon shooting, Raekwon and his boys shooting at them, and or them having any kind of beef within Staten Island. Also, it shows a lot about the RZA's brother, Divine, who is a character that I really respect because he was kind of taking care of RZA and RZA's sister. Yeah, 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 Lisa. That song is based on real life. His brothers was his everything. So even though he was really in the streets like that, and even though he was a street dude, he had a good side to him in the sense that he took care of both his brothers because his moms struggled. Ghostface Killer's mother struggled in the movie with drug addiction. So with the RZA's mother, RZA's mom's is a working woman, and she works for uh, the Italian mafia, the Gambino family. And in one of the scenes, she actually has a run-in. The family actually has a run-in with one of the Gambino family. I think one of the mafia guys is played by Vincent Pastore, who plays the part of Big Pussy in The Sopranos. Because remember, it's Staten Island, so the majority of Staten Island outside of the ghetto is all white Italian people. So black people and people of color is still the minority in Staten Island. So Rizza's mother has to put up with a lot of this racist abuse from the people that she works with, making crazy jokes to her and even coming to her house in one scene and threatening her. And they live in a house. So the brother Divine and RZA both have to really hustle and sell drugs on the street to really support their family because the mother is just barely, and the mother is played by Erica Alexander, that, of course, from Living Single fame, from Cosby Show fame, struggling to make ends meet because he moved the family out of the projects and he moved them into a house, but he's struggling to really make ends meet. Meanwhile, RZA, as the middle child, he's focused on his music. He's focused on making beats. He's focused on being a producer, and he's focused on rap. And his brother is just like, yo, get it together, snap into reality. We got to be out there making this money. But RZA, he's a different kind of kid because he's just very musically related, and he likes to read a lot of books. And eventually, through both reading books and going across this with the Staten Island Ferry, he becomes interested and becomes to know about the Nation of Gods and Earths, a group, aka the Five Percenters, and he becomes influenced in that, and he changes his name from Bobby to Rakim, and it shows you in the movie what really is the 5% Nation and how the 5% Nation, um, a breakaway faction from the Nation of Islam, really had an impact on the RZA's life. You know, how it kept him, conscious and kept him on the straight path. That and his music. Another big influence on his life, besides being a 5%er and being into his music, was Kung Fu movies. Kung Fu, of course, Wu-Tang, that's where he got the name from. He would sit there and he would watch these Kung Fu movies over and over. And in his mind, it shows in the movie, he would be playing, uh, himself out in the Kung Fu movies. So he was the kind of kid RZA was that read books, that was into 5%er Islam, and into a lot of kung fu movies and into a lot of music. He really wasn't really necessarily about that street life, but he felt like he had to do it to support himself and his sister and his little brother. Now, Ghostface Killer. Ghostface Killer is one of my favorite characters in this movie because, unlike the RZA, he's just street. You know what I mean? Like, he's about getting this money. He could rap too, but he's like, yo, rap is secondary to me actually getting this money and providing for my family and providing for my two brothers and holding my mother down. And he's best friends with the RZA. But while he's best friends with the RZA, he actually ends up sleeping with, having sex with, and being in a relationship and getting the RZA's sister pregnant. You know what I mean? So he has to, in the beginning, he has to hide his relationship with the sister from both the RZA and from the RZA's brother Divine, because he's business partners with him, he's friends with him. So, like, when they're out, the sister would be skipping school and they would be having sex, and it shows them, you know, having sex in the movie. But eventually, it comes out, that they were in a relationship and he has a kid with her. Yeah, you, you know. Now, Method Man is an interesting one because Method Man, played by Dave East, he was always into the rap shit. He wasn't never into the street shit. At first, he was playing lacrosse. He was living in Long Island and he was playing lacrosse. And then uh, he moved to Staten Island, and that's when he met the RZA, and he was working at the Statue of Liberty, but he was always rapping. They didn't show him doing no street shit. He was always just rapping and smoking weed. And Raekwon was again a rival of Ghostface Killer, and he was also selling drugs. But see, with him, his mom's and his stepfather had kicked him out because he stopped going to church. So there's a scene in there where he's sleeping on project rooftops, you know, doing whatever he can to survive and to get by. but at the same time, he's really good with rap. And RZA is just trying to encourage him, like, listen, you know, pursue this rap shit. Come with me on this journey to do this rap shit. But Raekwon is just like Raekwon. It's funny because even though Raekwon and Ghostface are enemies, they kind of think the same. Like, yeah, that rap shit is cool, but at the same time, I gotta make this money and I gotta live. You know what I mean? I gotta support myself. I gotta support my family. I gotta do what I gotta do, and I can't be necessarily focused on rap. And Old Dirty Bastard is RZA's cousin, so they show him a lot, and he's the comedy relief for the movie. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the jokes that come out of the movie come from Old Dirty Bastard. You know what I mean? Because Old Dirty Bastard was uh, he was funny. You know what I mean? Like the way he raps and everything. So by the time season two rolls around, the RZA gets locked up. He gets a record deal. He comes out with the first song, Prince Rakeem. ODB Lisa was played by, let me see. ODB was played by TJ Abrams. I'm I don't know. I think he's somebody new. The only people I really recognized from this was Ebony Obsidian. She's in Sisters. She plays the girlfriend of RZA's brother. Dave East, of course, is a rapper. He plays Method Man. Ashton Saunders, he played in Moonlight. And I didn't really recognize the guy from uh, the guy that played ODB. But let me look up what else he had done. Yeah, he doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, but he was good. He was good though. You know what I'm saying? And they show the influence that Rakim had on a lot of them. Because again, a lot of five percenter, Nation of Gods and Earths type stuff in here. And if there's any if there's any rapper that is heavily associated with the 5% Nation, um, besides Wu-Tang, besides them themselves, it'd probably be Rakim. That was something, the 5% Nation and the 5% Nation slang, it was something that was associated with New York hip hop. It was what made, to me, New York hip hop different than, like, Cali or whatever. Things that we would say, things that come out of the teachings of the 5% Nation, the 120s of the 5% Nation, like Word is Bond, uh, stuff like that. A lot of slang that we got really doesn't, people really don't know the origin of it, but it really does come out of the 5% Nation, which itself came out of uh, the Nation of Islam. You know what I mean? It's not, and Wu Tang, the teachings of the 5% Nation was really a part of what made Wu Tang Wu Tang. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, it's just like, I know it's a bad comparison, but it's just like um, Dipset. The fact that Dipset was all blood, you know what I mean, was a huge characteristic of Dipset being Dipset. You know what I mean? Like, it was a part of their music, it was a part of their swag, it was a part of the way they represented. The same thing here with Wu Tang. Wu Tang always talking about some 5% of stuff, always talking about some knowledge of self, stuff in their slang and in the way they carry themselves. You know what I mean? And because it, and gave mad props to Rakim to the point where RZA's original name was, instead of Rakim, you know, Rkeem, his original rap name. So uh, it showed that, you know what I mean, and it showed it was very New York. It was like I said to my mom. It was exactly like, not exactly, but it was to New York rap, New York hip hop, what Straight Outta Compton was to West Coast rap. You know what I mean? Only thing with this, um, Wu Tang, Wu Tang had a different kind of flow, a different kind of complicated flow. Again, if some of the references that they would drop, for example, from kung fu movies or God Body 5% teachings, if you didn't really know anything really about that, it would just fly over your head. That's how. Uh, yeah, there was two different seasons. Lisa, season one is just an introduction, really, to the life of the RZA and the life of various members of the Wu Tang Clan. Season two really gets into their type of, you know, their music. You know what I mean? The music side. When not when they record 36 Chambers, which is of course their classic album, the one that everybody knows, Cream Get the Money, Dollar Dollar Bill, y'all, things like that. Um, it shows when RZA first came out, season one, and you know how they got together. It was broken. It's by Hulu and it's broken down into shows. You know what I mean? It's not broken down. It's not like the Salt and Pepper movie or NWA. I mean, Straight Outta Compton, like a straight up movie is broken down into different seasons. But again, you know, it's it's when they're first meeting each other. You know, when they first get to know each other, they know. Thing is too, differently. How do I compare it with Straight Outta Compton? Differently than Straight Outta Compton. Uh, they all know each. You know what I mean? They all know each other already. You know what I mean? They all grew up, you know, together. You know, like Raekwon went to school with RZA, and RZA is the cousin of Old Dirty Bastard. You know what I mean? Like they all kind of knew each other. With NWA, I guess they all kind of knew each other too, but uh, Ice Cube was already rapping and Dr. Dre was in another group. This wasn't really, you know, like that. They was more like Wu Tang was more childhood friends with each other or childhood rivals with each other. This has a lot. This has differently than Straight Outta Compton. This has a lot more violence than Straight Outta Compton. Straight Outta Compton really doesn't have no violence whatsoever. It just, you know, music. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just music, a musical biography movie. This, especially season one, has a lot of violence and is more like a gangster movie. You know what I mean? Like it's more like a biography type movie, less about a musical group, and more about what would be like a gang. You know what I mean? Like 50s new movie, 50s new BMF movie. You know, nigga. I mean, you know, dudes selling drugs and stuff. You know what I mean? Things like things like that. You know what I mean? Then like they don't get really to the music part until part two. Part two is focused on the music. But that was cool though because it shows what made them them, and it was like two different rival factions of Staten Island coming together and really representing for their borough that never got represented on in in hip hop before, or even in music before, like the forgotten borough, the smallest borough. Like when we talk about music, we talk about uh, hip hop, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, not Staten Island really. Shaolin doesn't really get mentioned unless it's about the Wu-Tang clan. So they put their stamp on it and they made it official, you know, and their experiences shaped who they were as men that allowed them to come out with this rough and gritty music and being the ones, and this is something that they talk about kind of in connection with it. At the time they were coming out with their music, at the time when they first came out, like when the RZA first came, the RZA, excuse me. Lisa says, do they talk about Method Man? The Redman they don't talk about because remember, Lisa, Redman is in a different group and he's from New Jersey. Redman is from Newark, New Jersey. He's in Def Squad with Keith Murray. He's not in the Wu-Tang Clan. He's a friend of Method Man, and they did an album together, and they're best friends, but they're not in the same group. And no, Wu-Tang is not like 20 guys. The original Wu-Tang was 9 guys. The original Wu-Tang was 9 men, you know, all childhood friends. Well, childhood friends slash enemies, knowing each other since childhood. And later, other people got added on. You had Ghostface Killer, you had Raekwon, you had RZA, you had Jizza, You God, Inspector Deck, and Capadonna. So it wasn't like 20 guys. I know that misconception about them being like 20 guys comes from a joke that Chris Rock did at one of the VMAs. One of the VMAs, Chris Rock said, it's like 20 guys coming out here that's on the Wu Tang Clan. No, that wasn't true. It's later guys that got added on to their label, but the original ones that they're talking about here is just the core members. But one of the things with them, again, like I'm saying, is that um, at the time when RZA first came out, 1991, 1990, around that time, the early 90s, New York was completely dead. New York wasn't saying nothing. You know what I mean? That style of New York hip hop, nobody was checking for New York at that time. And that's one of the things that the record executive, the record labels tell them. Like, not only do you come from Staten Island and you got this strange image, of Chinese kung fu movies, and all of y'all are talking about some 5% of shit that a lot of people that are not, that are not clued into anything or understand anything really that 5%ers are really, talking about. You're from New York, and New York hip hop is passe. Everybody was checking for the West Coast at that time, in the early 90s after Dr. Dre came out with the Chronic. So, you know, it's like nobody wanted to give them the time of day because it was something different, something completely new, unique, and it was New York. And we know that in history. We know that New York fell back hard as far as sales until 1994 when Biggie came out with Ready to Die, because Biggie was just on some street shit. He wasn't on no shit like them. Their sound was unique. Their sound was something different. But people didn't begun to appreciate Wu-Tang, I think, until much, much later, until um, Raekwon came out with the purple tape. Because Raekwon, again, Raekwon the chef, it shows why they call him the chef in the movie, because he's cooking up crack. You know what I mean? He's making crack. So like uh he really him and Ghostface really brought the street element to it. Where as the RZA was on some shit that the RZA philosophical shit that the RZA was always on. Jizza was on that shit too. And ODB was on the comedy. So they all had different styles and they all presented it differently. And they held it down for New York at a time when New York really wasn't, nobody was checking for that New York, excuse me, that New York style, that New York sound. Everybody was checking for the West Coast style and sound. And they was East Coast. You know what I mean? So it's a pretty good movie and giving you a lot of insight into what formulated the Wu Tang sound, the influences they had, the mafia influences being from Staten Island, the Five Percenter, Nation of Gods and Earth influences, and the kung fu influences, and the influence of pain and suffering that Raekwon went through with his father being on drugs, Ghostface went through with his mother being on drugs, and having to take care of his two disabled brothers. That really, they really looked up to him. And one of the things that hit me is a fight between RZA's sister. Again, she's going out with Ghostface Killer, and they're having an argument. And Ghostface says, "You really want to have, kids with me, knowing that it's a possibility that we can have kids, and the kids could come out with muscular dystrophy like Darius and Darren, my brothers." And she's just like, "You know what? I don't care. I'll ride with you no matter what." And then he realizes that he has a real supporter in his corner. You know what I mean? He has a real queen in his corner. You know what I mean? So the love story between Ghostface Killer's character and the character of his sister Cherie is sweet. It's a shame they had to keep it in secret for the longest, but then I started thinking, I'm like, damn, maybe if the RZA finds out, if the RZA and his brother Divine finds out that he's messing up, he's seeing his sister, he'll probably do some Scarface shit and kill him. But he doesn't do that, especially, you know, they have a baby together. And, and the sister is really sharp. Like there's one scene where the little brother gets beat up, right? RZA's little brother gets beat up, and he says, "What?" RZA says, "Oh, well, what happened?" She said, "He says, well, Cherie, she clotheslined him and beat him up like Roddy Piper." So I'm thinking, damn, the sister's on one tough cookie. And then one scene on the bus where this one girl gets in her face about reading the book Little Women. She's like, "Oh, I don't know if you know, but the back of the bus is for black people." Basically insinuating that because she's a smart girl and she reads books and she's into her studies and she's studious, that she's a punk. And then RZA's sister comes back with a hell of a comeback, like, "Oh, well, at least I ain't gonna get pregnant by multiple babies' fathers, and then be having to ride this bus because he's locked up. At least I'm smart enough to dedicate myself to a man that I know loves me." you know, I thought, I'm like, damn. So RZA and his sister are both on the same level. Like they're both very studious, they both read a lot of books, and they're very responsible. But see, Ghostface, he's not like that. You know what I mean? And there's one scene too where they're laying up together, and he's like, wouldn't you rather be with a dude that's like you that reads a lot of books and very studious and stuff like that? She's like, well, if I wanted to, I would be. So the love story between them is kind of like uh, two people from opposite sides of the tracks. He's a bad boy. He's a gangster. He sells drugs and shit, and she's a good girl. She's studious. She's into her books, and it's kind of like a forbidden love at first because he don't want RZA and his brother to find out that they're really messing around. You know what I mean? So there's that level to it. The guy that plays Raekwon is really good. Uh, Shamik Moore. He doesn't really look like Raekwon. Raekwon's kind of on the big side, and this guy's kind of skinny. But he play. This guy also was in Cutthroat City, another movie produced by the RZA. The one where I said Tyron Woodley had his dick bitten off about the kids in New Orleans. So him and RZA have worked together before. He plays the part of Raekwon, and it shows how Raekwon got the name Raekwon. How he, it's not a documentary, it's a movie. I, I would give it 4 out of 5 because it helped me to learn a lot about the Wu-Tang Clan. You would think a guy like me that is very into history and I have a lot of exposure to the 5% Nation and consciousness in general, and I like a lot of kung fu movies that I would be into the Wu Tang Clan, but I really never was necessarily because you know not at first, not when I first started listening to hip hop because, like I said, when I first started to listen to hip hop, I was listening to West Coast rap. I was listening to Snoop, Dre, Tupac. You know what I mean? I wasn't listening to the Wu Tang Clan all that much until later, like until they was not really like until Method Man came out with Tikal. Then I started to listen to that, and that's when I kind of related. I related a lot to RZA because even though I was growing up in the hood, you know what I mean. I read a lot of books. I was heavily knew a lot of friends that was um 5 percenters and knew a lot of people that was into the Nation of Gods and Earth, knew about the Supreme Mathematics, Supreme Alphabets and stuff, and was exposed to that, but not through Wu Tang. I was exposed through people that I knew, personally, and through not a lot of Nas's music. You know what I mean? So I didn't really know a lot about Wu Tang, and I love biography movies where you can learn something. Like if I'm gonna watch a biography movie about somebody I know about for years and years, why am I watching this? I want to be able to learn something about them. You know, and again, being a person with a disability and seeing how the dedication that Ghostface Killer had to his brothers, and um, the brother that plays the one brother with a disability is real funny. Like besides ODB, a lot of the funny parts that you'll see in this movie will be from uh, Ghostface Killer's his brother. Like I'll give you one example. Ghostface Killer goes out to Ohio, right, and he gets shot, and then he comes back, When he comes back to New York, the brother says, "Yo, I heard you got shot." He said, "Where'd you hear that from?" He said, "Well, I got my I got my ear to the streets." You know what I mean? And then one time he's reading his comic book, he's reading the Mask comic book, right? And Riz's sister leaves, and then the brother with the disability, the younger brother with the disability, goes over to him and was like, "Does Bobby know that you're fucking his sister?" And just starts laughing, you know, laughing. It's like, damn, the little dude about to blow up his spot, you know. So uh, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about these men because again, Wu Tang was not when Wu Tang was Wu Tang at their heyday. I was not into them. You know what I mean? So, and I like movies where you can actually learn something. People, you're gonna watch a movie about somebody you've known about, you know, all about. There's no point in really watching them. You wanna be able to gauge something different. It's kind of like there's a scene in a movie where RZA is talking to Ghostface Killer about Stax Records, Estelle Stackson, the founders of Stax Records, an R&B label from Memphis, in the '60s, and he was like, "Well, if you know everything about it, why you still got these books? You know, why do you keep the books?" And RZA was like, "Because I want to take mental notes of it, and each time I listen to it, and each time I read it and watch it, I learn something different." So that's like this. I love to watch movies about famous artists because you learn something about the creative process. You learn something about how their life shaped their creativity and the influences that they had. But anyway, I recommend this movie, I mean this series to people. This is exactly what I wanted to see when Straight Outta Compton came out. I made a video. I said, um, in the video, I said I would love to see more hip hop movies, more hip hop biography movies, and what NWA was to the West Coast, Wu Tang definitely was to the East Coast. They embodied everything that it means to be an East Coast rapper, and they're one of those most iconic groups in all of music. You know, you see that Wu Tang logo, just like if you see the Rolling Stones tongue, or you see the NWA logo, or the Beatles logo. You got the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, you got Wu Tang and NWA, most iconic groups in all of music. This movie is available at least on Hulu. It's called Wu-Tang American Saga. Um, it's available on Hulu, and the second season and the first and second season are both out. Um, and I recommend it. You know, you'll learn about what New York was really like in those days when people wasn't on no, like they would represent, they would rep their borough, and they would represent like Staten Island, parts of Staten Island represent for each other, Brooklyn represents for each other, and all that. But in the early '90s, we wasn't New York really wasn't on no gang shit. That was not what New York was doing in the '90s. You know, you represented where you were from, and that was it. You know, but yeah, you can watch this on Hulu, Lisa. Um, I found it always interesting that they didn't have no Wu Tang didn't never had no. And I mentioned this. This is one of my observations. They never had no female energy in the Wu. Most of their fans are guys, and most of the people that listen to their music are guys. You know what I mean? So I guess it was because it was hardcore rap. You know what I mean? But it was never no female energy, all male energy. I wonder why that is. You know, usually other other groups have, a girl in it at least. You know what I mean? Like Rough Riders, even Rockefeller, at least one girl in there. You know what I mean? But Wu Tang was all male energy. But I recommend it though. Lisa, if you want to get to know something about their creative process and what really formed them as a group. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. And I'm sorry about the picture. I really wanted to put up a Wu picture, the Wu logo, because again, like I said, the Wu logo is iconic, but something was really messing up with the picture. But don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Peace. Or as members of the Wu-Tang would say, peace, God. Love y'all.